Welcome back to Tectonic Takes continued coverage of the MLS playoffs for the 2025 season. This is our MLS Cup preview. With me here today is Abram. We were scheduled to talk with Alex Winley. She is a fantastic writer that covers Inter Miami. Had a last minute thing come up where she had to attend to a personal matter. We wish her the best and we look forward to talking to her again soon. But we will still link Alex Winley's social media in the description. Give her a follow and follow her work. Now it falls on us to talk about this anticipated MLS Cup final for many reasons. If you're looking for two teams that have never won an MLS Cup final before, for multiple different reasons, mainly because they are newer MLS clubs, then you've got it. You've got Vancouver Whitecaps out of the West. You've got Inter Miami out of the East. If you're looking for potential Dave versus Goliath, but still star player and star power on both sides, you've got it too. And Abram, I know you're just fresh off of watching the highlights, particularly of Inter Miami's demolition of New York City FC. What were your initial thoughts based on that impression?
Well, we discussed it, just a little bit before we hit record, but I felt like the first two goals that Miami scored are pretty well. First three, because that they did well. The second goal was really good. They got a header off the Jordi Alba cross. Can't really do much. Can't fault anyone there. The great cross, great header. You know, fair enough. But the first goal, and they kind of almost messes it up by heading it back into the defender. The defender bounces off his head, gets right in front of Allende, where he's gonna want to strike that. And he did. He hit it really hard, and that's where you can give the keeper some like a little bit of wiggle room. Where, but honestly, he's at the near post, and the ball is striked at the near post. I can't really, look at that and say that the keeper couldn't have done better. And Ivan, you know me, I am always defending the keepers. But when you're defending the keepers, you also have to, be honest about what they should and shouldn't be able to do. I think that if Freeze, right, if Freeze is able to, keep his wits about him, then he gets that ball. I'm kind of wondering if the occasion was getting to him or if he expected the ball to be shot at the far post. But even then, if it's shot at the far post, it's shot at the far post, and you weren't going to stop it. You have to cover your near post, and you do not get beat at your near post when you're at the near post. That's your domain. You have to be confident about that. Um, the third goal, just to round things up, I was also very disappointed in Ivan. I was telling you that they had like three players in front of Messi, so Messi wasn't able to shoot, and it was on his right foot. And they left number 24. I can't remember his name, but they left 24 wide open. No, none of the center backs were covering him. They had two players separate from the three I mentioned, who were the three were covering Messi, and the two separate players from that were just looking to cover a shot, maybe, or they're just watching. And I understand when you're playing Messi, you're never, 100% confident that he's not going to score, and you're always like anxious about that. But you have to do the fundamentals. You have to, cover the attackers in the box. If there's three guys on Messi and one guy's standing alone near the 6 yard box, honestly, backtracking is like walking backwards to stay on sides. There's just so many opportunities for any defender to pick him up, and they don't. And he's in such a dangerous position that he's just able to get an easy finish. So that's 3-1, and at that point in the game, that was like the 67th minute, I believe. It's really hard mentally to be like, okay, well, we still got this. We still are able to do this, especially when you think about like the caliber of opposition that they're facing. They're like, oh, we're 3-1 down against Messi, Jordi Alba, Busquets, Rodrigo. Like, it's not a great place to be mentally, and so I think that really leads to the eventual scoreline. I think it was 6-1. Um, you know, uh, thorough thrashing, 5-1. Sorry, I was close. And it doesn't really matter either way because it was just a thorough thrashing. I think that New York they've done really well up to this point. So it's kind of disappointing to see them, really choke. And I really think that it was like a mental thing where they just couldn't really keep their cool.
A word on New York, had they just lost, if it was 3-1, if which it was at one point, you meet at the locker room after the game. Pascal Jensen talks to his players and can really sell them on, hey, this is a great season. There's nothing to be disappointed in. But it doesn't matter if it's Inter Miami with Messi or any other team in Major Soccer. When you go out, your season ends 5-1 in particular. That is a tough sell to be really happy about what has been a very good season where New York City have exceeded expectations. But that's the nature of the beast with the playoff system that all but one team will go home unhappy, at least with a traditional season like Premier League season. Theoretically, 10 teams can go out on a high note provided you win a game and you're not relegated even with the win. So there's some differences there, and Major League Soccer will be experiencing a lot of those changes when they shift their season format, but that's still not what we're talking about today. I also, before we dive deeper into Inter Miami's win, I also want to congratulate Vancouver Whitecaps on a similarly impressive 3-1 win over San Diego FC. They went into Snapdragon Stadium. They were out of their comfort zone. BC Place has been a fortress for Vancouver Whitecaps. The fans have been behind this team throughout this 2025 season. You knew you were onto something special. They had a deep CONCACAF Champions Cup run. This was even before Thomas Muller was even a thought, let alone a signing. But on the road, that was a different story. A lot of people thought this could go either way. San Diego's fairy tale run could continue. They've already made history being the first expansion team since the Chicago Fire in 1998 to make it to a conference final. But aided with a own goal and a red card by the keeper Pablo Cisniega, Vancouver Whitecaps still took care of business in phenomenal fashion, 3-1, and now they're on to the MLS Cup final. And throughout the season, maybe it was a little bit unfair to the Whitecaps. Every step of the way, we're like, yeah, they're playing well. They're in the Western Conference race. They look like they have all the components, especially post Thomas Miller, to contend for an MLS Cup. There's always just something there. It's like, but I just don't see it until it's actually happened. So, your thoughts on Vancouver Whitecaps making the MLS Cup final?
No, I mean, uh, yeah, obviously it's a surprise. You're not, looking at Vancouver most of the time and thinking this is a incredibly successful franchise. Like they've done really well for themselves to get to this position. I think that obviously Muller is a great addition to this team, but honestly, without Muller, even I feel like it's a very good foundation that they've built there. I think that Berhalter is a rock star there. I think that Gold was even when they were struggling, he was able to maintain a level of brilliance, and he's been injured, and so he's not been able to kind of add too much to their play so far. But I think that no, I don't know if it's their roster construction or their recruiting or what it is, but it's just they feel solid. They feel like they're a well oiled machine at this point. And I can't really point to a specific thing about them that where I'm like, okay, this is what's making them different from other teams. Because if Angelo was here, he could probably help us out with that. But no, they have a very key pieces that are overperforming in terms of our expectations of them, and now they're seen as like those players like Berhalter and Takaoka, they're seen as like, okay, these are really high level MLS players. But 3 years ago, I don't know if we would have all been saying that. Berhalter was maybe like at Columbus, he was like, okay, this is a decent midfielder, but he's one of the best in the league this year, and so I don't think anyone could have seen this coming.
Yeah, and even then, Berhalter was seen as like the latest in the Columbus Crew midfield system, with the main exception being Darlington Nagbe. He had accomplished so much in Major League Soccer that you separated his success from Columbus Crew's midfield success. You've seen Aiden Morris go off to Middlesbrough, and you thought, okay, Sebastian Berhalter is just thriving in this environment, but He's gone to Vancouver Whitecaps where he didn't have much fanfare upon his arrival, and then he steps up, particularly in that CONCACAF Champions run, on set pieces, his technical ability, his all-around midfield play. And yeah, this had the makings of a strong MLS Cup team from the beginning of the season. It just took a while for everyone to see the bigger picture outside of those in British Columbia. And while Vancouver Whitecaps is a newer team within the history of Major League Soccer, starting MLS play since 2011, the original Vancouver Whitecaps, they have a lot of history in North American soccer. Their first run being 1974, a year that we as Quakes fans hold in high regard. Until 1984, they were part of the Canadian Soccer League until 2010, and then they moved up to Major League Soccer. So there's a lot more history for Vancouver Whitecaps to point to than Inter Miami. But even if you look at the sporting histories of these two cities, it's still sharp contrasts just outside of soccer. Of course, when you think of Miami, maybe if you're a hockey fan, you think of the Florida Panthers that have won back-to-back Stanley Cup titles these last few seasons. And of course, the Miami Heat dynasty with LeBron James, even before that with D Wade. Vancouver, as a sports city, they haven't made it to a final since 2011 when the Vancouver Canucks got destroyed by the Boston Bruins. So these are two cities that are hungry for this MLS Cup win. And Vancouver, I do see myself rooting for a bit more than Inter Miami, but I think that comes as no surprise given the narrative of this Major League Soccer season. You're either enamored by Lionel Messi, the Barcelona players, or you just want them to go down. And while my animosity toward Inter Miami is not as high as some other Major League Soccer sources, I think that it's hard to find reasons to want in Miami to win unless you're just loving, everything Lionel Messi, which normally I do, but in the context of Major League Soccer, it's just kind of a weird paradox, right, Abram?
Yeah, and I think that there's like obviously it's regrettable what happened to our guests today, and the fact that they weren't able to show up. But I was kind of struggling to reckon with the fact that I'm like, well, I kind of have a lot of reservations about this Miami roster, where I'm not saying they're cheating. I truly believe that everything is like no, I do. I believe everything is above the board for the most part. I think that they are following the rules, but I think that one, the rules are kind of bent for them, and two, they have just so much sway that the reality bends around them to make it fit the rules, right? So Rodrigo DePaul, why is he there? Because he's taking like a 50% pay cut just to play with his best friend Messi. That nobody else in the entire league has ever been able to do that ever, and so it's not breaking the rules, but it is unfair, right? And I'm not saying that they should be penalized for it. I don't have any, legislation that I would enact to prevent this kind of thing from happening because I'm not that smart. I'm just a guy with a microphone. But it is something that you have to consider when you're thinking about like who am I rooting for in this tournament. And I think that um, Miami is punching above their weight in terms of who they're bringing in and just kind of like squeezing them into the salary cap. Where I feel that Vancouver is doing a different thing where they're getting in players much cheaper. They're finding these hidden gems and they are raising their value just via how they play. Right, they're just doing a really good job with how they're performing. So it's very stark contrast when you're looking at like just the philosophies of these two teams. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes down because I see Vancouver as a very gritty team, a team that's like they want this really bad. I think that they deserve to be here, and this is going to be a massive opportunity for them, and they're not going to take it laying down. Whereas New York, I didn't get the sense that this was like do or die for them. Obviously, if I were to ask them, they would have said that like, of course we tried super hard, right? But they have a closer mentality in my eyes to Miami, where they're just bringing in whoever they want, basically.
Right. And when we do get to the predictions, I'm gonna have to weigh down my attachment to Vancouver Whitecaps just from the coincidence that this happened to be the year that Nicole and I traveled to Canada. We were at Vancouver. We got to see them play in what turned out to be the best MLS season of their history. And both these teams have come a very long way. Inter Miami, they did have some star names, the Higuain brothers and Blaise Matuidi before Messi Mania arrived in 2023. But Vancouver Whitecaps, we're talking about players like Camilo Sanvezo, who scored 39 goals in his 90 something appearances in the first few seasons of Vancouver Whitecaps history. And then, of course, Alphonso Davies came through their system, and now he is not just a Canadian star, he's a world star. But in any case, now is time for us to break down Inter Miami's roster. If you need a refresher on our thoughts on the Vancouver Whitecaps roster in depth, we will link the video that featured Angelo and Celso when we were breaking down Vancouver Whitecaps versus LAFC in the description. But we will make references to their players when we talk about some key matchups. So we'll start with the goalkeeper situation for Inter Miami, and that was a big storyline for them throughout the early part of this season. They came into this campaign with Drake Callender as their starter. He had several injury and inconsistency issues. Then it was up to Oscar Ostari, but lately it's been an unlikely hero to emerge as their number one goalkeeper throughout this playoff run. From LA, 23 years old, Rocco Rios Novo. He has played in the USL Championship with Phoenix Rising, and he has only made 13 MLS appearances for Inter Miami, but they've all been important ones. And while he is less experienced than his counterpart between the sticks for the Whitecaps, he has not looked like a impediment in goal for Inter Miami. And there's been times even during this messy period where Inter Miami have had holes in their roster, particularly in the defense, and they've had to paper that over with Lionel Messi scoring ridiculous amounts of goals. But what do you make of their goalkeeping situation, Abram?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the backstory that you provided watching these highlights. I did notice that it wasn't calendar, so there's that when I was watching the highlights. But no, there was one or two highlights that I saw where I saw some really high class saves. I can't point to a specific uh instance because I don't know the names of the players. I watched it and I was like, okay, gotta do the podcast, so I didn't pay attention too much in that. Look, it could just be that like his competition isn't performing, and so they have to use him. But this is Inter Miami. They bringing in players left and right, so I kind of think that this guy, probably has it. Um, I'm not sure if I see him as stronger than Takeoka because I've always seen Takeoka as one of the best keepers in the league. But no, just is a very good find for them. They tend to get these really young South American players and they find a lot of gems in there. Miami, Kuramashi being one. A bunch of like what was that player that went to Brighton? Farias, something like that.
That was Diego Gomez.
Yeah, Gomez, yeah, yeah, right. So, so it's not like they're just like bringing in huge names. They are also putting a major focus on youth and developing youth and players who haven't had the most opportunities. So this is an example of that, and yeah, it's a testament to how well or how aggressively Inter Miami is run. Um, but I'm not sure if this is somebody that they're going to stick with for the long term. But for now, the fact that he's playing in big games for them, that should be all you need to hear to know how highly he's being rated by Mascherano.
Yeah, agreed. he is peaking at the right time to be a contributor in this Inter Miami team that overall is peaking at the right time. And I also mentioned the much improved defense, where in the past you can poke holes at even some of the players that feature in this defense currently. In the 5-1 victory over New York City, you have previous scapegoats such as right back Marcelo Vegant and center back Maximiliano Falcon. Now, Falcon's antics, they'll drive you up the wall. Like, he's definitely one of those defenders, like your Pepe's, your David Luiz, that will make some rash challenges, but also will complain whenever the referee dares to call them for a foul. And then the other side, I feel like, has been much more solid in the recent Greek international, Noah Allen, 21 years old. He's been playing well enough to edge fellow 21-year-old Thomas Aviles out of that starting spot. And then this juggernaut in what is going to be his final game of his professional career, one of two players, if that's the case for him in Miami, Jordi Alba. He is not taking it easy just because of who is with him, who's in front of him, and the fact that by default, even at 50%, he's going to be one of the best defenders in Major League Soccer. Jordi Alba has continued to play very well wherever he's been at, from Valencia to Barcelona, and he's just always an unsung hero, even though he has been viewed as one of the best left backs in the world at his peak, because he is just that good at what he does, and he's always finding himself among greatness because he is great himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a shame that he came over in the situation that he did, because when you're thinking about Busquets, people regard him as the greatest in his position of all time. Messi, obviously, the same thing. Suarez, there's a case to be made. I've heard people rate him as the number one striker of all time, and so when you're looking at Jordi Alba in comparison to that, just fullbacks in general aren't getting the kind of recognition they deserve. But say Jordi Alba was playing for, let's say, Philadelphia. They have an attacking wing back in Kai. What's his name? Sorry, tell me.
Wagner.
Wagner said, I haven't heard of him since I used him in my fantasy team years ago, and I haven't played fantasy for a minute. But say he was playing in a position like that, or maybe Cincinnati, where Orellano plays. Anyways, attacking fullback, right? He would be more highlighted in a team where he's not competing for the spotlight with all these like legends in their positions. He is phenomenal in every aspect of the game, going forward and going back. And maybe he's not as quick as he used to be. He used to be like incredibly fast and a nightmare to play against. I'm sure, but no, just even without that blistering pace, he has just the mental attributes that set him apart from any other fullback in this league. I think if you put him in a different team, he shines much more just because of the fantastic attributes that he has.
Yeah, and part of it might have been that on the opposite flank during those prime Barcelona days, you had Dani Alves, who operated on the same side of the field as Lionel Messi, so that connection was much more apparent. But yeah, when you think of the best left backs that we've had a chance to see growing up, Roberto Carlos comes to mind. I think that's the pinnacle right there. And then Ashley Cole was the standard, particularly in the Premier League. And then Jordi Alba, rightfully so, is up there too. His main competition might have been the El Clasico rival of Marcelo during his peak. So Jordi Alba this season, he has 14 assists, and I think we think that assists are easy to come by for fullbacks because of their interplay with wingers, but typically fullbacks don't get a lot of assists in any league. If you get a double-digit assist season as a fullback, that is special season. Trent Alexander-Arnold got his reputation propped up because of those types of stats, and even Anthony Robinson, he was getting comparisons to Trent Alexander-Arnold because he had a high assist total for Fulham last season. So that is an important stat that doesn't go unnoticed. And of course, some assists are more impressive than others. But Jordi Alba, whether he's played in a back three, a wing back, full back, as Inter Miami shifted formation a couple times, he is the leader of that defense, and he, along with Sergio Busquets, who will be the next player we talk to, it's on one hand still a shame, even though we've gotten to see them a lot. They've had incredible, lengthy careers, but it's always sad to see great players go. And Sergio Busquets, maybe there's been at times this season where some of the more athletic midfielders have given him some problems, but he's still a metronome out there.
Of course, Busquets one of the best players in his position of all time. So there's obviously a lot of danger there. He has a magical connection to his teammates that he's played with for a very long time, and so I think that teams, even though I think that he is regressed physically, I think that people will take that and then underestimate him as they have his whole career, and he thrives in those moments where he knows that he could take advantage of moments where the opposition is overlooking him. Um, and the famous quote we've all heard at this point, where if you watch the game, you don't see Busquets, but if you watch Busquets, you see the whole game. Right, and I do think that even in his advanced age, that is still true. And if you're new to soccer, if you're new to tactics and stuff, and you're watching this match, I would recommend watching Busquets and how he dictates the play, because you might see soccer in a different light, where it's not just about who's running the fastest, who's you know dribbling the most. It's about much more than that, and it's a very tactical game.
With Sergio Busquets, he has played a very physically demanding position at a high level essentially since 2008 when he made his first team Barcelona debut. Just went into the fold in time for that first of three Champions Leagues that they won in that stretch there in 2009, and then, of course, 2011, 2014. And I look at the matchup that is likely going to be between Sergio Busquets and Thomas Muller in the middle of the park, and I feel like there's not a lot to split the two at this point in their career. Yeah, Thomas Muller may have a little bit more in the tank. He's going to have a few more seasons ahead of him, but I think that they've had some clashes in some high-profile games. Of course, Thomas Muller and Lionel Messi themselves will be meeting for a big final. Not as big as the 2014 World Cup final, of course not, but there's just storylines abound there, and there's going to be some technical clashes for sure. You might think Thomas Miller is going to be outgunned as the one world class player or formerly world class player against several that Inter Miami have, but I think that's going to be a fun matchup to watch.
Yeah, and if you ask Thomas Muller, he would still say that he's world class.
Yeah.
And the way he's performing, he immediately made an impact in that Vancouver team. He's probably the push that they needed to become this higher class team that's competing for these titles. But no, very strong player, and I'm really excited because that's another player that you watch, and he doesn't have the stereotypical attributes that you'd expect from someone in his position, where he doesn't dribble that well. Like, he does all these things pretty well, but like he's not phenomenal at anything other than positioning. He calls himself a Raumdeuter, which is German for space interpreter. And he's basically coined that term because he plays so his style is so unorthodox in how he likes to phase into positions where he's kind of like Wondolowski in a way, but German and has won World Cups and and Champions League titles. So just a comparison to bring it back to Quakes really quickly.
Yep. Wondolowski and Messi were bringing up all of Thomas Muller's opponents from the 2014 World Cup today.
I mean, we had to, and if I remember correctly, I was watching this is totally off topic, but I was watching a reel on Instagram, and Messi scored this free kick against U.S. in that World Cup, and then I see the guy who fouled him, and I'm like, that's crazy. Why are you taking him out in that position? And then they zoom in and they show a closer angle, and it's Wondolowski just taking him out from behind, and it's like, oh, come on, Wando. Come on, you can't do that. Um, and that might be a different tournament, but I do remember that that distinctly did happen, and it was a atrocious tackle from Wando, but it's the kind of shenanigans we've come to expect from him.
Speaking of shenanigans, we are not a gambling podcast. If you do gamble, gamble responsibly. But the one thing that will ensure you do not lose money, bet on Rodrigo De Paul getting into a fight at some point in this game.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of built a career on being this. I mean, obviously, he has a lot of class and a lot of ability in other aspects of this game, which got him to where he is. But what sets him apart is he's a master of the dark arts, as I like to say. There's a few players that fit this category. Wando is not exempt from this. He dabbled in the dark arts. So did the rest of the Bash Bros. But Rodrigo De Paul is like why we think of him is what he can do to rile up the opposition and get in their heads and maybe make them play worse. It will probably be a factor in this Vancouver final because the where Vancouver is very strong is their center midfield, and so I expect a lot of clashes to happen in that area of the pitch. But yeah, I agree with Ivan. That's a safe bet there.
And with Rodrigo De Paul, even though he has played in the top levels of Europe, just looking at all the stops along the way, he's coming through Racing Club, which is a big club in Argentina, but not one of the big two that you would think about when you think of Argentine soccer. And then going to Valencia and Udinese, he was rising up the ranks. I think he scored 33 goals throughout 150 plus games for Udinese, which is a pretty good record considering he was a deeper lying midfielder. And then it was just a match made in heaven when he got to play along under Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid. So he's built a reputation for a reason. And if you've been thinking, as we've discussed, the European greats in this Inter Miami team, man, Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets, and Messi, it's hard to hate these guys. But then we get to Rodrigo De Paul and Luis Suarez. It's like, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot to be said about their antics and Suarez's antics especially. Um, but you know you can't deny their footballing ability and the things that they've achieved. Obviously Suarez isn't a World Cup winner with Uruguay, but he's one of the best strikers the world has ever seen. And Rodrigo Paul, obviously a probably a late bloomer in that respect, but you know definitely a in this league. Um, you got to say one of the best midfielders in the league just based off his quality and what he can do.
With Luis Suarez, he had the suspension, and Javier Mascherano opted not to start Luis Suarez once he was available for selection again. And that's been my favorite decision of Javier Mascherano in his young coaching career because he has played alongside Luis Suarez. These are really good friends outside of his team. But if you're able to separate friendships from the professional aspects of this job, making tough decisions, that shows you're cut out to be a good manager. The jury's still out, right? Javier Mascherano is kind of in this good landing spot for him to succeed as a manager at Inter Miami. But to make those tough decisions, to lean into some of the more athletic younger players, and also to have Luis Suarez fresh off the bench, which is going to be an X factor, especially as many of these games this MLS playoff season have gone to extra time and penalties. Luis Suarez came off the bench at the 82nd minute, so he played about 10 minutes when you factor in stoppage time. If you need him for 15 minutes of regulation, maybe a little bit more, potentially the 30 minutes plus penalties if the game goes that far. I think Luis Suarez has had a little bit of a reset where he is doing what he needs to do in his shorter cameo appearances. And I think it's less time for him to get gassed out and potentially to make a boneheaded mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad to see the way he runs. You can tell that there's not much cartilage left in his knees. He looks old, and he is about like 38. And even though he can't run like he used to, not as smooth or anything, you could see that there's undeniable quality there. Just where he runs, when he does it, and what he does once he receives the ball. That's what matters for in the case of Luis Suarez, and also having teammates that are going to be able to put it in those positions to take advantage of his expert positioning and finishing, and well, they just happen to have that in Lionel Messi, right? So I think that the world is looking at this game and they're just gonna see Miami is gonna run away with it. I don't think that's gonna be quite the case. I think that there are a lot more factors. I think Miami has a lot of weaknesses that kind of go unnoticed because of how good they are on the attack. But no, this is some of the best players to ever do it. This is like a last hurrah for them, and like I said, that's another reason to watch this game. Ivan, I believe that we're gonna be you're gonna be hosting the watch party.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. We've covered the main players already. You don't need us to break down why Messi is awesome. I do want to save this section though for the younger contributors. These are the midfielders and attackers that have given Inter Miami new life and new threat as a juggernaut in Major League Soccer. 22-year-old Baltasar Rodriguez. You got 19-year-old Matteo Silvetti. He got a goal in this last game. And then off the bench, you got an assist off of 24-year-old Yannick Bright, a goal from 22-year-old Delasco Segovia, and then the star attraction of this archetype of Inter Miami player, the 26-year-old winger, and I know 26-year-old is like right in the middle of the sweet spot for soccer age, but in this team, definitely a younger contributor. Tadeo Allende. When we saw Tadeo Allende play against San Jose Earthquakes earlier this season, I think he spurned a few big chances, and I think that was a similar story for him in some other key games throughout the season. I think that was a narrative of him during the Leagues Cup run, but for him to come through, man of the match, hat trick against New York City, that is the biggest scare factor of this Inter Miami team is that it's literally half a dozen guys that on the night, on Saturday, or in this case, the afternoon when this game is going to be taking place, that there are so many different ways that they can slice and dice you.
Yeah, I was watching Allende, and you can't fault him for the fact that New York City made some mistakes to allow him those opportunities. All you can say is, "Wow, he took those opportunities." Right? The first goal especially was particularly impressive to me. Just how hard he was able to strike the ball. Um, like I said, Miami is looking out for these lesser known players and they're giving them these big opportunities. And it's kind of crazy that, like, because before, maybe 1 year ago, 2 years ago, you look at Miami and you're like, hey, they got some good players, but wow, the players that aren't, from Barcelona, they're not very good, and they're really, giving them a hard time. That's not really the case anymore. This is an evolved version of them, and that's why they've made it this far. Um, no, yeah, like about Allende, just he got a hat trick in this match against New York, and if I heard it correctly on the commentary, he got a brace in the 2 games prior to that. That's a lot of freaking goals, dude. And that's what they need with Suarez, missing. They need a hot striker, or winger wherever he plays. They need somebody to be putting in the goals. And looks like they've got him. So I don't know where they're getting these guys. I don't know how they can fit all these guys on their team, like Bruce said. But we're watching something special.
My tectonic take is as great as this Inter Miami team is, that if you were to make a combined 11 of the Whitecaps and Inter Miami, I think it's still a 6-5 split in favor of Inter Miami. It's not a complete blowout. I think you put Takaoka in net. I think for the back four, you have Falcon and Alba representing Inter Miami, and then you have Prizo and Bogue and Ocampo representing Vancouver. I think for the front six, then that's where, yeah, you have Mueller and Berhalter, and then the rest is going to be Messi, Allende, Busquets, and another Inter Miami midfielder. But this Vancouver Whitecaps matches up better with Inter Miami than what we anticipate. They'll be underdogs in this game, but if they lose, there's absolutely no way that it's gonna look horrible. I feel like that's a tectonic take right now because Inter Miami have looked unstoppable in the playoffs, but Vancouver Whitecaps are built to take them down potentially. They've done it once before in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. It's not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
Yeah, and I would go as far as to say that Allende is not guaranteed in this lineup. I know that White has been injured, but you have to look at his quality and think that he has a chance of getting in there. I'm not sure I would put him in there right now because of form and injuries and stuff. Allende is obviously red hot right now, but overall across their careers, it's more even than not. So yeah, Vancouver definitely you can't count them out, and I'm hoping it's not just an Inter Miami blowout because that's what people are probably going to be predicting. Um, but I can see a very close game here.
The presence of Brian White makes a huge difference for Vancouver Whitecaps as well. We didn't talk about him too much with Angelo and Celso because we weren't sure if he was even going to be available or if he was going to start. The one concern, speaking of injuries, would be the Whitecaps because they've had a red card suspension to deal with, and they've also had a few players get banged up back there. But if you're starting Brian White as opposed to Daniel Rios, that's going to give you a much better chance of winning. And then off the bench, yeah, Messi has Suarez, but they've been using Ryan Gold as their super sub, Vancouver Whitecaps as well. In an ideal world, Ryan Gold would be a shoe-in starter for the Whitecaps going to this final. But it's a similar story with Brian White. He's had an injury-riddled campaign, and Gold has kind of excelled in this role off the bench. So it's just going to be a really fun MLS Cup final. I think that if there is a final that a lot of MLS neutrals and neutrals of soccer in general are going to watch, yeah, there's the Messi factor, there's the Barcelona ties, and there's the intrigue from the outside. But I think that there's a lot of stylistic factors, there's a lot of MLS built narratives that come into play for this MLS Cup final, too.
Yeah, and when we talked to Angelo with Celso, they agreed in the match versus each other that set pieces was going to be a really big factor. And I think that that's going to be the case yet again. Inter Miami, one of the weaknesses. I said earlier that they have weaknesses, and this is probably one of them. The set pieces, defending set pieces, uh, and it just happens to be one of the strengths that Vancouver has. And as Mikel Arteta has shown the footballing world, that's a much bigger advantage than most people want to give it credit for, right? This can be a close game if Vancouver shows up to play, if they show up with the heart that I think that they will. I'm kind of leaning Vancouver.
The way I see this happening, Miami's going to take a first half 1-0 lead. Then Vancouver Whitecaps are going to roar back. But then someone like Segovia is going to get a last minute equalizer. Then it's going to be scoreless in extra time. He'll go to penalties. Both Rios Novo and Takaoka will save one penalty each. But ultimately, in sudden death, I think Inter Miami are going to sweep this one. Let's say 5-4. I think that it's going to be a very close game, but I think that the weight of this game, it's now or never for two of these players. It's now or never for this core. I think that that's going to give them that extra boost to seal this victory that's going to complete the destiny in a way. But I think the fact that they've had some bumps in the road, they weren't quite able to recover the hole that the pre-Messi team dug themselves in 2023. They got knocked out by Atlanta United in 2024 in unceremonious fashion. I think that that's going to make this win that once seemed inevitable for Inter Miami feel more satisfying. That okay, you can hate the fact that Inter Miami won in the moment, but then you sit with it for a few minutes and you're like, what can you do? Like they fought for it, they worked hard for it, and hopefully it's going to be a very good match.
Yeah, of course, and I think I very much believe it will be a good match. But no, as someone who doesn't have a horse in this race, I like I said, I'm just excited to see some good soccer. I don't think that like obviously it would be a little bit disappointing just to see Goliath win, but as like I said, a lifelong Messi fan, a Barcelona fan, I have reason to root for them as well. But I'm excited to watch it come game time.
And there's going to be more reasons to be excited to be a soccer fan in the Bay Area. We're happy to see San Jose Earthquakes as well as the broader Bay Area community rally around the soccer world. They hosted a wonderful NWSL final. That was great to watch, Abram. I'm sure you probably heard about the festivities surrounding the event and saw the game. Everything except for Trinity Rodman perhaps re-injuring herself. It was a great final. Besides that, and we wish her well.
No, and I didn't get to watch the game, but I did hear from people who were there, but also you know the players and the staff in the interviews. A lot of good things to say about PayPal Park, and I love PayPal Park just because of obviously what it means to us, but it's cool to see people who have no reason to like it, right? They're coming into it and they decide to like it because of the quality that it has. The unbiased opinion. I don't know why I said it in such a long-winded way, but no, it's great. I am super happy with the expansion of the sport. I know our friend of the show, Fabian Rankel, is doing his job and doing a lot to expand the sport in the country as well. And with the World Cup, with a bunch of things, happening, it's a great time to be covering soccer right now in 2025.
Yep, and we're just going to keep on doing it because the next time we'll see you as we record next Monday, we'll not only know the outcome of the MLS Cup final, but we'll also know which teams are in which groups for the 2026 World Cup. So there's going to be more to talk about. Thank you for your time, Abram. Always a pleasure. And thank you for everyone who watched this MLS Cup final preview, whether you're just visiting as a Whitecaps or Inter Miami fan or an MLS neutral fan, or you're our Quakes fans. We can't wait to talk more Quakes as well. We're going to be keeping a close eye on roster moves during this offseason. And as always, go Quakes, and hopefully we get a good MLS Cup final.